Hey, everybody, this is the Psychology of Human Relationships, and this is part one of Who's in Control. If you would, subscribe and hit the bell that lets you know if new videos are posted, and let me know if you like it or not. Post some comments or suggestions. I would appreciate it. Okay, we'll talk about control. Boy, we like control, don't we? There's a lot of baggage attached to the word control. We'll get into some of that. Do you know what you actually do control, and can you make an informed decision about what you do and what you don't? And what do you do with what you do and what you don't? Do you control the weather? Well, you don't control it, but you can influence it indirectly through your carbon footprint, more directly through perhaps cloud seeding with silver iodide crystals over your farm. You control other people's lives. Well, ordinarily we think not, or we shouldn't, but it happens, doesn't it? We think benevolently that we know best what's best for them, and we might try to persuade or even control some of their behavior. We certainly would want to control the environment of an infant and young child and give up more and more of it as they age and can demonstrate good decision making. Quality of work you produce, do you control that? Well, usually, but if you're not given enough information or resources to produce the work, then you can only do that which you have control over, which is always going to be the response that I am going to give you. Do you control whether or not you acquire an infectious disease like COVID-19? Well, you influence it, don't you? Do you control how long you're going to live? Well, you can influence that too, can't you? By your health habits. Ultimately, you don't. One of the things that you do control and can and perhaps should is how you treat others and whether or not you're going to live by your values. You control that. Now, do you control how others treat you? Trick question. The answer is partly. You influence the way others treat you with your behavior. If you are assertive and appropriate with good boundaries, then you're going to influence directly how they treat you. But you don't ultimately control it. So you see what this is about. We like control, and it's generally a mixture of influence versus no influence. The more control that we have, the greater our predictability of the next period of time will be. That's why CEOs and those in charge of things have more control than those who do not. They have greater predictability as a result of that control. Therefore, they have less stress. More control equals less stress. That's why we strive for it, even in places we don't have control. People who are very anxious sometimes make an effort to control things when they really shouldn't, because when they believe that they have some control or are influencing the next moment or someone's behavior, they have a slight reduction in their anxiety at that moment. More control increases our sense of mastery over our environment. It can actually, in a short-term way, bolster our self-esteem, and it certainly saves time. Yeah. So there's some good things about control. So I want you to think about it in this way. We control some aspects of most environments and situations. Okay? We control nothing or near nothing in some circumstances, but those are rare. we control the majority of things in a few places. That's one reason, I suspect, we love being at home in our rooms or a place that we've just really decorated, or in our car. I think that's one of the reasons. The trick is to know what and how much you control, assert the influence you have over that which you have influence over, to make things better for the greatest number of people, which of course includes you. So there is an ethical element as well as an empathic element to exerting appropriate control. There are things that can get in the way of taking control or exerting influence. One is when somebody's really aggressive. Aggressive people try to control far too much, and in the short run may get what they want, and often do, but it destroys relationships. Passivity and helplessness is a manipulative set of behaviors, or at least can be. I suppose, they are learned behaviors. So in that learning of those behaviors, there is an effort to control, but it gets in the way of control because then you're giving it up. But sometimes it's also a manipulative effort. So, and then passive aggressiveness. That's where on the surface things look okay with you and you're friendly and able to take care of business, but under the surface you're rageful and feeling disrespectful and so on. We'll talk about this later in the course. Then there's manipulation itself. So harmful psychological manipulation. There's appropriate positive manipulation. Yeah. Like I manipulate this wireless mouse, for example. But harmful psychological manipulation is certainly something that gets in the way of appropriate control. And then selfishness and narcissism. Again, often gets people what they want, at least in the short term, but has a very negative effect on the people around them. Then greed. Greed is taking too much literally and figuratively. And it doesn't work for relationships either. Lack of skills can get in the way. So when people don't have really adequate communication skills and good boundaries, that gets in the way of asserting appropriate control. And then fatalism, which is believing that everything's part of a plan and no matter what you do, it's already set in the stars as to what's going to happen. Well, you're giving up any kind of control that you could have used appropriately if you believe that. Okay. So in psychology, we talk about the locus of control. And the locus of control means where does the control lie relative to you? Does it rely within you? We call that an internal locus of control. Or do you assign it outside yourself, which is an external locus of control? And that there are big differences between people who are predominantly internal locus of control types versus external control types. Internal control people believe that their efforts make a difference, and so they will really make an attempt and are often successful at handling success. They will set their own standards for performance. They don't have to have other people telling them what good enough is. They're more adaptable as things change, and everything changes. They're much more successful in both careers and relationships. Those are some good ones. They are often directed toward self-improvement, and they are more likely to seek appropriate support, not endless support, but see what they need and ask for it. Externals are sort of the opposite. They don't believe their efforts are going to make much difference, so they don't necessarily try, or are less effective at their efforts to control stress that they're under. They let other people set their standards for them. They're less adaptable, and so they have more negative stress, what we call distress. And then they're more likely to isolate themselves when they're stressed or seek endless advice. Ask what they should do of many, many people. they're not as successful in careers and relationships. They often don't have good boundaries. Yeah. So what kind of careers do you think an internal locus of control person might have? If you said a manager, a lawyer, a physician, a business owner, those sorts of things, those are more likely to be internal. What kind of folks are more likely to be successful and be external? You know, an internal can take an external kind of job. They won't be very happy with it. But how about an external person who's happy with their work? Well, someone who has rigid schedules set by a company they might work for, a service industry in which the customer is always right, those kinds of things. Okay. Now, there is a continuum. There isn't a I'm all external, I'm all internal. There's a continuum from external to internal. So in externals, control is less determined by you and more determined by others, and internal is the opposite. Control is more determined by you and less by others. Here are a few strategies for taking more control appropriately. Some of these are going to seem odd to you, but there's a reason why they're on the list. One is consider changing things in your environment, and even small changes can make huge differences. Just rearranging the furniture, going out in the garage and seeing if there's anything that you liked once but haven't decided to throw away, and you might like it again, and that happens sometimes, and you put that on the wall and take something else off. Just changing your environment, moving things around, cleaning things, assuming more responsibility for organizing your daily life. You know, if you're constantly losing your keys, and you know who you are, get a key rack, and when you come in every day, put your keys on the key rack, and they'll always be there. Be creative. There are always alternative strategies to do things. Always. And you can choose strategies that will more likely give you a sense of greater control. Be proactive in your decision making and your anticipation of challenges to come. Try new activities instead of old ones, especially ones you've been repeating over and over again. That's the definition of insanity, is it not? So delegate responsibility for other people whose job it is to do those things. An 11-year-old, barring complications of a physical or emotional matter or other things, but the average 11-year-old can do their own laundry. Why? Because they can. See? Keep their own room clean because they can. Take the trash out because they can, because we all contribute to the household. Yeah. Don't do things for people whose job it is for them to do. Okay? If you say yes all the time, learn to say no. Thank you very much, but no. No's not a dirty word. Say no. And you know who you are if you don't say no a lot. You're saying yes before they ask you what you want to do, and your time is probably eaten up, and you are probably tired all the time. Yes? That goes with the turf. Okay. So whatever you choose to do in life, there are consequences. They can be positive consequences, they can be negative consequences. We learn good from bad, right from wrong, and where limits are set by seeing the consequences others endure and by experiencing consequences when we do or don't do something. Okay? So what would be the consequences if I didn't give you these videos to look at? Well, those of you not coming to class would be stretched, wouldn't you? Yeah. So everything has a consequence, and we just have to think proactively about that sort of thing. Volume 2 coming up, Part 2 coming up.